Drinking tea can be one of the healthiest daily habits you have. When it's made properly, tea supports digestion, focus, hydration, and long-term metabolic health, which is exactly why choosing the right kind matters. The good news is that there are 9 UK tea brands doing things the right way. They use better leaves, gentler processing, and methods that preserve what actually makes tea beneficial. But not all tea on supermarket shelves deserves that reputation. There are 2 very popular tea brands you should avoid because the way they're processed strips away tea's benefits and replaces them with harsh, over-extracted compounds that can irritate digestion and leave people feeling worse over time. By the end of this breakdown, you'll know exactly which teas are worth drinking, which branded options to stay away from, and how to spot poor quality tea instantly, even when the packaging looks convincing. Let's get into it. Tea 9. Yorkshire Tea. This tea earns its place because it uses better leaf than most mass-market options and avoids relying entirely on fine dust to create strength. In its gold and loose-leaf versions, the leaves are less aggressively broken down, which matters because leaf size affects how tea extracts. Larger, more intact leaves release flavour and compounds more gradually, resulting in a smoother cup with less bitterness and fewer harsh tannins. From a health perspective, that slower extraction is important. Tea that brews too fast often delivers a sharp hit of caffeine and tannins without the balancing compounds that support focus and digestion. With this tea, people often notice a steadier feel, alert without feeling jittery, and satisfied without needing to keep topping up. Another advantage is consistency without extreme processing. While this is still a widely produced tea, it doesn't rely as heavily on ultra-fine particles designed purely for speed. That makes it easier on the stomach compared to many standard tea bag teas. This is also an accessible upgrade. You don't need to change how you drink tea or where you shop. Switching from basic tea bags to a version with better leaf quality is often enough for people to notice the difference. This isn't the highest quality tea on the list, and it doesn't aim to be, but it does move away from the most aggressive processing methods. And that alone makes it a better everyday option for many people. The next tea on this list improves things further by changing where and how the leaves are grown in the first place. Tea 8. Clipper Organic Tea. This tea stands out because it starts with organic sourcing, which changes how the leaves are grown and handled long before they're packaged. Organic tea farming limits synthetic pesticides and chemical inputs. That matters because tea leaves are infused directly in hot water. Anything on the leaf ends up in your cup. Cleaner growing standards mean fewer residues and a gentler overall impact on digestion for people who drink tea daily. Another important difference is processing. Clipper avoids the most aggressive methods used to force fast colour and strength. The leaves are handled with more restraint, which helps preserve natural compounds that contribute to flavour balance and smoother extraction. The result is tea that feels less harsh and less bitter, especially when brewed normally rather than rushed. Many people notice this in how the tea feels after drinking it. Instead of a sharp caffeine hit followed by a drop, the effect tends to feel steadier and calmer. That makes a real difference for people who drink multiple cups a day or are sensitive to overstimulation. Clipper is also transparent about what it uses and what it doesn't. There are no artificial flavourings, and the bags themselves avoid plastics found in many conventional tea bags. While that isn't the primary reason it's here, it reflects an overall approach that prioritises fewer compromises. This tea works well as a daily option for people who want cleaner sourcing without moving into specialist or niche brands. It's familiar, widely available, and noticeably gentler than standard supermarket tea. The next tea on this list takes another step forward by combining organic standards with improved leaf integrity. Tea 7. Waitrose Duchy Organic Tea. This tea improves on standard supermarket options by combining organic sourcing with less aggressive processing. The organic standards matter first. Tea leaves are directly infused, so anything used during growing ends up in the drink itself. Duchy organic tea is produced under stricter farming rules, which reduces chemical residue and results in a cleaner cup for people who drink tea every day. The second difference is leaf integrity. While still packaged in tea bags, the leaves are not reduced entirely to fine dust. That slightly larger leaf structure slows extraction, which leads to a smoother flavour and fewer harsh tannins compared to many conventional supermarket teas. From a health perspective, this shows up in how the tea feels. People often report less bitterness, less stomach irritation, and a calmer, more balanced effect, especially when drinking multiple cups throughout the day. Instead of a sharp caffeine hit, the stimulation feels steadier and easier to tolerate. Another advantage is reliability. This tea doesn't rely on artificial flavoring or exaggerated strength. The taste comes from the leaf itself, which encourages more consistent brewing without needing to oversteep or add milk to mask bitterness. This tea fits easily into everyday routines, especially for people already shopping at Waitrose or choosing organic products. It avoids many of the shortcuts that undermine tea quality while remaining accessible and familiar. Now that you've seen what better supermarket tea looks like, it's important to look at the opposite, because one of the most popular teas in the UK is also one of the most aggressively processed. Tea to avoid. 1. PG Tips. PG Tips is one of the most familiar tea brands in the UK, and that familiarity is exactly why its drawbacks often go unnoticed. For many households, it's the default choice, brewed multiple times a day, every day, without much thought about how it's actually made. The core issue is how the tea leaves are processed. PG Tips relies heavily on CTC processing, which crushes, tears and curls the leaves into extremely small particles. These particles are designed to release colour and strength almost immediately. That speed is convenient, but it fundamentally changes how the tea behaves once brewed. When tea extracts too quickly, the balance is lost. You get a concentrated release of caffeine and tannins early on, without the slower releasing compounds that contribute to calm focus and digestive comfort. This is why many people describe this type of tea as harsh, bitter, or strong in a way that feels stimulating rather than supportive. Over time, this can shape how tea fits into daily life. People often compensate by adding more milk or sugar to soften the bitterness, or by brewing shorter and weaker cups that still deliver a sharp caffeine hit. Neither approach restores what's missing. The leaf quality simply isn't there. Another overlooked factor is frequency. A single cup may not feel like a problem, but when this kind of tea is consumed several times a day, every day, the cumulative effect becomes more noticeable. Digestive irritation, jittery energy, and that familiar mid-afternoon crash are common complaints tied to heavily processed tea. PG Tips isn't unhealthy because it's tea. It's unhealthy because it's over-processed tea, designed for speed, uniformity, and mass production, rather than how the body responds to it. When you compare it directly with teas made from more intact leaves, the difference in smoothness, balance, and overall feel becomes clear. Once you move away from tea built around dust and speed, it's hard to go back. And the next tea on this list shows how much difference better leaf quality can make. Tea 6. Twinings. Loose, leaf, pure, origin, range. This is where it becomes important to separate brand name from product type. Twinings sells a wide range of teas, and many people judge the brand based on its standard tea bags. But when you move into their loose leaf and pure origin ranges, the quality changes noticeably, because the leaves themselves are treated very differently. The key difference here is leaf integrity. These teas use larger, more intact leaves rather than fine dust. That slows extraction, which matters because tea releases different compounds at different stages of brewing. When extraction happens more gradually, you get better balance, less bitterness, steadier stimulation, and a smoother overall cup. From a health perspective, this shows up in how the tea feels. People often notice clearer focus without the sharp edge that comes from fast brewing dust teas. Digestion tends to feel calmer, especially for those who drink tea throughout the day rather than occasionally. Another advantage of the pure origin range is sourcing clarity. These teas are tied to specific growing regions, which usually means better oversight of harvesting and processing. While still produced at scale, the focus shifts away from pure speed and toward preserving character and structure. These teas also encourage better brewing habits. Because the leaves aren't designed to dump flavor instantly, people are less likely to oversteep or mask bitterness with milk and sugar. That naturally changes how tea fits into daily routines. This isn't specialist or artisan tea, but it's a clear step away from the most aggressive processing methods. For people who want to improve tea quality without leaving familiar brands behind, this is often where the difference becomes noticeable. Next, we'll look at a tea that approaches quality from a different angle, using whole herbs and blends rather than traditional tea leaves. Tea 5. Pukka herbal teas. This is where tea shifts from stimulation to support. Pukka's herbal teas are built around whole herbs, roots, seeds, and spices, not powdered extracts or artificial flavorings. That matters because whole ingredients release their compounds gradually, which changes how the tea feels after drinking it. Instead of relying on caffeine and tannins, these blends support digestion, calm the nervous system, and help the body settle. Many people notice less bloating, fewer energy swings, and a more balanced feeling overall, especially when replacing regular tea later in the day. Another difference is ingredient clarity. Pukka clearly lists what goes into each blend, and sourcing focuses on organic standards. That reduces exposure to residues and avoids filler ingredients that don't serve a purpose. These teas also encourage slower, more intentional drinking. Because flavor develops gently, there's no need to mask bitterness with milk or sugar. Tea becomes something you use to support how you feel, not something you drink on autopilot. Quick pause here. If this breakdown is helping you rethink the tea you drink every day, take a second to like the video and subscribe. It helps more people find this information, and it allows me to keep making clear, practical tea breakdowns like this. Pukka won't replace traditional tea for everyone, but it fills an important role. It shows that tea doesn't need to be strong or fast to be effective. It needs to be made with care. Next, we'll look at another tea you should avoid, one that's just as familiar as the last and processed in a very similar way. Tea to avoid too. Tetley. Tetley is another tea that's deeply embedded in everyday UK routines, and for many of the same reasons as PG tips. It's familiar, affordable, and designed to brew fast. But that speed comes with trade-offs that matter when tea is a daily habit. Like many mass-market teas, Tetley relies heavily on CTC, processing, which breaks the tea leaves down into very small fragments. These fragments are engineered to release colour and strength quickly, creating a dark cup in seconds. The problem is that this kind of extraction is unbalanced. When tea is reduced to dust, it releases caffeine and tannins almost immediately, without the slower brewing compounds that contribute to smoothness and digestive comfort. The result is a cup that often feels sharp or bitter, especially if brewed for more than a minute or two. For people who drink several cups a day, this can add up. Common complaints include stomach irritation, a jittery or wired feeling, and the sense that tea provides stimulation without real satisfaction. Many people respond by adding more milk or sugar to soften the taste, which changes how tea fits into the diet overall. Another issue is consistency over quality. Tetley is designed to taste the same in every cup, regardless of water quality, brewing time, or leaf variation. That uniformity is achieved by processing, not by better leaves. Flavor depth is sacrificed in favor of speed and predictability. This doesn't mean Tetley is toxic, but it does mean it's poorly suited for frequent consumption if you care about digestion, energy stability, and getting actual benefit from tea. Once you compare it directly with teas made from more intact leaves, the difference becomes obvious. One supports a daily routine, the other simply fills a mug. With that contrast clear, we can move back to teas that prioritize quality over speed. Tea 4. Yogi Tea. Yogi Tea stands out because it approaches tea from a completely different angle. Instead of relying on broken tea leaves for stimulation, it focuses on whole herbs and spices chosen for how they affect the body. These blends use ingredients like ginger, fennel, cinnamon, cardamom, licorice, and various roots, not powdered flavorings or artificial aromas. That matters because whole ingredients release their compounds more slowly and gently, which changes how the tea feels after drinking it. From a health perspective, this shows up in digestion and nervous system support. Many people find these teas soothing rather than stimulating. They don't create the sharp caffeine lift associated with black tea, and they're less likely to irritate the stomach. For people who experience bloating, tension, or evening restlessness, this difference is noticeable. Another important aspect is balance. These blends are designed to work as infusions, not quick caffeine delivery systems. Flavor develops over time, encouraging slower brewing and more mindful drinking. There's no need to mask bitterness with milk or sugar, because the taste comes from the ingredients themselves. Yogi Tea also places emphasis on organic sourcing and transparency. While branding plays a role, the ingredient lists tend to be clear and consistent, which makes it easier to know what you're actually drinking. This tea won't replace traditional black tea for everyone, but it fills a gap that many people don't realize exists. It shows that tea can support how you feel without pushing your system harder. Next, we move to a tea where leaf quality takes center stage, one that shows what happens when dust is removed from the equation entirely. T3. Teapigs. This is where tea quality becomes obvious the moment you open the bag. Teapigs uses whole tea leaves and large leaf pieces, not dust. That single choice changes everything about how the tea brews and how it feels after drinking. Larger leaves release flavor and beneficial compounds more slowly, which creates balance instead of bitterness. From a health standpoint, this slower extraction matters. You get a steadier release of caffeine, fewer harsh tannins, and a smoother overall effect. Many people notice they feel alert without feeling jittery, and satisfied without needing to immediately make another cup. Another difference is transparency. With this tea, you can actually see what you're drinking. Whole leaves, identifiable pieces, and clear sourcing remove the guesswork that comes with heavily processed tea bags. What's in the cup looks like real tea, not residue. Teapigs also encourages better brewing habits. Because the leaves aren't designed to dump color instantly, people naturally steep for the right amount of time. That leads to better flavor and less digestive irritation compared to teas that punish you for brewing too long. This tea often changes expectations. People realize tea doesn't need to be aggressively strong to be satisfying. It needs structure, space to extract properly, and leaves that haven't been broken down for speed. At this point in the list, the difference isn't subtle anymore. Once you've experienced tea made from intact leaves, it becomes hard to go back to dust-based bags. Next, we'll look at a tea brand that builds on this quality, but focuses even more tightly on sourcing, ethics, and consistency. T2. Good and proper tea. This is where tea starts to feel intentionally made, not mass-produced. Good and proper focuses on high-grade whole leaves, careful sourcing, and minimal processing. The leaves aren't crushed for speed or consistency. They're selected and handled to preserve structure, which directly affects how the tea extracts and how it feels after drinking. The result is balance. Flavor develops gradually, bitterness stays low, and the stimulation feels steady rather than sharp. People often notice they don't need to rush the brew, and they don't need to mask the taste with milk or sugar. The tea holds its own. From a health perspective, this matters because slower extraction supports calmer digestion and more even energy. You're not getting an instant hit followed by a drop. Instead, the experience feels smoother and more sustainable, especially for people who drink tea multiple times a day. Sourcing is another key difference. Good and proper is transparent about where its tea comes from and how it's grown. That usually means better oversight of harvesting and processing, which shows up in consistency and quality rather than volume. There's also a behavioral shift that happens with tea like this. People tend to slow down, brew properly, and drink fewer cups. Not because they're restricting themselves, but because the tea actually satisfies. This brand sits just below the top spot because it still operates at a wider scale. But in terms of leaf quality, processing restraint, and overall experience, it's a clear step above most supermarket options. And that brings us to the final tea on this list, the option that removes scale almost entirely and shows what tea can be when nothing unnecessary gets in the way. T1. Independent loose leaf. Tea merchants. This is tea at its most intact and where the difference becomes impossible to miss. Independent loose leaf merchants work with whole, unbroken leaves, often sourced in small batches and handled with minimal interference. The leaves aren't crushed for speed, color, or uniformity. They're left intact so extraction happens gradually, the way tea is meant to brew. That matters because leaf integrity controls balance. Whole leaves release flavor, caffeine, and tannins slowly, which creates a smoother cup with steadier stimulation. People often notice clearer focus without jitteriness, better digestive comfort, and a sense of satisfaction that lasts, not the urge to immediately brew another cup. Sourcing is another key difference. Independent merchants tend to be closer to the farms, the harvests, and the processing stages. That usually means better oversight, fresher tea, and fewer compromises made for mass distribution. You taste variation by season and origin, a sign the tea hasn't been flattened into a formula. Brewing habits change too. Loose leaf tea encourages proper steeping, measured amounts, and attention to water temperature. Those small shifts reduce bitterness and over-extraction, which is where many problems with everyday tea begin. There's also a natural moderation effect. Because the flavor is fuller and the experience more complete, People tend to drink fewer cups, not out of discipline, but because 1 cup actually satisfies. This is the closest you'll get to how tea has traditionally been consumed for centuries. Whole leaves, time to steep, and benefits that come from restraint rather than force. If there's one takeaway from this list, it's this. Tea quality is decided before it ever reaches your mug, by leaf size, processing, and how much the tea has been interfered with. Once you experience tea made this way, everything else on the shelf becomes easy to judge. How to spot poor quality tea instantly. Once you know what to look for, bad tea becomes very easy to identify. First, look at what's inside the bag. If the tea looks like fine dust or powder, that's a red flag. Dust is a sign the leaves have been aggressively crushed to force fast. Brewing. Whole leaves or larger pieces extract more slowly and retain balance. If you can't see the leaves at all, quality has already been sacrificed. Next, pay attention to how fast the tea brews. Tea that turns dark in seconds is usually over-processed. Fast colour doesn't mean better tea. It usually means excessive tannins and caffeine being released all at once. Good tea takes a little time and rewards patience with smoother flavour and steadier energy. Notice the bitterness. If the tea becomes harsh or unpleasant quickly, even when brewed carefully, that's a sign of broken leaves and poor balance. High-quality tea can be brewed properly without needing milk or sugar to mask bitterness. Check how you feel after drinking it. Good tea tends to feel clean and satisfying. Poor quality tea often leads to jittery energy, stomach irritation, or the urge to immediately make another cup. That's not normal. It's a response to over-extracted tea. Finally, don't trust familiarity. Some of the most recognized brands rely on processing, not leaf quality. Branding doesn't tell you how the tea was handled. The leaf size and brewing behavior do. The teas worth drinking share the same traits: larger leaves, gentler processing, and slower extraction. The ones to avoid rely on speed, dust, and strength. Once you understand this, choosing better tea stops being guesswork. If this breakdown helped, share it with someone who drinks tea every day and still thinks all tea is the same. And if you want more clear, practical food and drink breakdowns like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Once you know what to look for, choosing better tea becomes simple and your daily cup starts working in your favor.